Good evening and welcome to another episode of ShireTV. I'm James Cleveland.
And I'm Darryl W. Perry. Despite the fact that Part 1, Article 32 of the New Hampshire Constitution recognizes the right of the people to give instruction to their representatives by way of petition, and Part 1, Article 31 states, the legislature shall assemble for the redress of public grievances, during their session on January 30th, the New Hampshire House of Representatives failed to act on the petition that called for the censure and/or impeachment of Representative Cynthia Chase. Speaker of the House Terry Norelli ruled that since no member of the House had sponsored the petition, no one could make a motion on it. Representative Gary Richardson told the union leader that House rules now require legislative sponsors for petitions. Over the past 2 years, such petitions were heard by the Redress of Grievances Committee, which was eliminated at the beginning of this year.
Representative George Lambert objected and asked to have the petition sent to a committee. He said a representative's job is to represent the public and uphold the Constitution, which allows the legislator to address the grievances of citizens. The House voted 276 to 77 to back the Speaker. That vote included 87 Republicans. The petition is now filed in the cabinet in the clerk's office, most likely never to be seen again.
There are now 3 unanswered questions for the New Hampshire legislature. 1. Since no action was taken on the petition against Cynthia Chase, am I to believe that the official position of the New Hampshire General Court is that Free Staters are not welcome in New Hampshire and that laws must be passed to make us leave or not move here to begin with? 2. Since the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to uphold the ruling of the Speaker that a petition for redress cannot be heard absent a legislative sponsor filing said petition during a small window in November and December, am I to believe that the people have no right to have their petitions heard outside of this small window in the fall? And 3. How does that decision fit with Part 1, Article 32 of the New Hampshire Constitution, which recognizes the right of the people to give instruction to their representatives by way of petition, and Part 1, Article 31, which states, the legislature shall assemble for the public redress of grievance?
Yeah, this is really a perfect example of, the legislative branch is not even following their own rules, and it's a great illustration of how they don't care about what their constituents think. I mean, really, there's no accountability for these people.
Right. Well, the thing is, they claim that their rules, which they adopt every year for themselves, which are supposed to only affect their behavior and their proceedings, somehow affect everyone. And since their rule says that legislators must now file a petition, despite the fact that in the past anyone could file a petition, well, our rules now say this, so you must abide by these rules. And after all, there's this social contract that you supposedly signed just by being in an area that we claim to have jurisdiction over. So, you should know these things, and you should have had a legislative sponsor for this 3-4 weeks before these statements were made.
Yeah, one thing I was kind of curious about, I guess in your opinion, let's say the grievance panel still existed. How do you think that would have changed what happened here?
Well, when the grievance panel actually did exist, or the grievance committee did exist, they heard every petition that was filed by citizens. But because the rules changed this year and they eliminated that committee, they also changed their rules to say basically that we're not going to hear petitions filed by individuals. But that's not actually what the rule says. They just removed the word petition from the rule, and the Speaker decided that that means that petitions don't have to be heard.
Now, they weren't even going to discuss this issue, correct? And I think one representative brought it up. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, George Lambert, and we'll have the video of this in 2 weeks, where George Lambert asked for a parliamentary inquiry and said, Speaker, how do we bring up something that's on the calendar that has not been discussed? And she said, I think you're referring to this petition that was filed by people, and since it has no legislative sponsor, we don't have to do a thing. And one thing that I find interesting about this petition is that it was a petition seeking a censure, which is basically a formal statement that we disagree with this statement or these actions. And there are a lot of people that are claiming that somehow a censure, which says we disagree with this, is somehow a censorship to remove the free speech of people. It was never my intent to remove anyone's free speech. It was my intent to have the legislature at least discuss and vote on whether or not the statements of Cynthia Chase that free staters are the biggest threat, they're not welcome, and that laws must be passed to make us leave, whether or not that was the official position of the New Hampshire House of Representatives.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I have to admit that I thought it was you're calling for the censor, that you didn't, you were trying to limit her free speech. But now that I guess I've been educated, I mean, you can look up the word. It means like the legislative body condemns
a formal disapproval.
Yeah, exactly. So you weren't calling for anyone's free speech to be limited or
no. She can say whatever stupid stuff she believes. I just think that as an elected representative, when she calls for passing laws to harm a specific group of people, she should somehow be held accountable for that.
Yeah, in any other case, this would be totally disgusting. Like, if it was like we need to pass laws to prevent, let's say, Hispanics from moving to New Hampshire, it'd be so outrageous. It's unbelievable.
There have been more and more reports of police and military conducting scary drills that involve firing blanks in schools and downtown areas. ThinkProgress.com reports students at a high school in Illinois experienced a uniquely terrifying school shooting drill on January 30th. Instead of conducting a regular school lockdown, Cary Grove High School administrators simulated gunfire by shooting off blanks in the hallways while students locked their classroom doors, pulled the curtains, and hid. TV stations in Houston and Miami are reporting of military drills that involve military helicopters and gunfire.
In Miami, a Black Hawk helicopter flew over the downtown area. According to Miami police, it was part of a military drill simulating an attack in an urban community. Miami was specifically chosen for the simulation. WSVN-TV in Miami reported, police were unable to disclose specifics about what agencies were involved, but they said the drills were done at night for the public safety. Miami police commander said, the reason they were done at night and the reason they were done in the later hours is because we were trying to minimize disruption to traffic and minimize safety concerns. He also said the drills will continue and cites security concerns as the reason for the secrecy.
The drill in Houston involved several agencies taking over an old high school building. KTRK-TV reported there were armed men in fatigues, plenty of weapons, and what many thought were real live rounds. Francis Gerald, who lives near the area, said, when you see this, you think the worst. When you hear this, you think the worst. I felt like I was in a war zone.
Parents of students from the Cary Grove High School in suburban Chicago received a letter that read, these drills help our students and staff to be prepared should a real crisis occur, but it may cause some students to have an emotional reaction. Protecting children was viewed as a reason for the drills in Houston as well. Glenn DeWitt from Houston said, if it's to protect our kids, I'm all for it.
And now here's a video.
Just in, a military drill in downtown Miami, complete with these Black Hawk helicopters, elite soldiers, and police officers swarming the streets. It's kind of scary when you suddenly look up and see that, but it's all about being prepared for the unknown of urban combat.
And if you came across that scene that you just saw tonight, well, it likely left you in awe. Local 10 photographers, along with reporter Christina Vasquez, were there to witness it all. Christina.
In awe, and as you mentioned, it can be quite alarming. We counted them, 7 Black Hawks thundered across downtown Miami. And we're going to take a pause here so you can listen in, so you can appreciate what it sounded like to be there. A rare sight indeed to see these Black Hawks weave weaving in between downtown Miami buildings. And what I can tell you, what we know, is that this was a joint military drill with the Department of Defense and Miami-Dade County Police. The rest, we are told, is classified, but for being a secret operation, it was certainly conducted, as you see, in such a public way, in full public view, as they made their way from downtown Miami over to Marlins Park and then roared right back. I can tell you that a similar drill was conducted on Tuesday night. I know that because I saw it firsthand. I was actually, as you watch the images from tonight, on Tuesday night, I was on the MacArthur Causeway with my husband as we saw, once again, 7 Blackhawks coming toward us, heading toward the beach. And what really caught our eye is how low they were flying. I mean, they were just hovering right above the causeway. It's certainly something you do not see every day. At the time, we actually thought perhaps it was a movie shoot. Coming back out here live, I'm certain a lot of the folks that were in that area, as they saw that, maybe that's also what they thought it was. But it was, as once again we are told, a joint military drill. We asked all the questions you might imagine about what was conducted today, but we are told, Lori and Calvin, that all of that information cannot be released to the public.
And any indication, Christina, if we'll see this again tomorrow night or through the weekend?
Classified.
Classified.
There's a reason why they do that. There's a reason why they do that. We're sharing these images with you because no doubt there were people in the buildings, on the streets, taking a look at that. And we want to make sure you understand what was happening. But there's, importance on their end to make sure that that information does remain secret. So this is a drill, as you said, Lori, to keep us all safe.
That's right. Well, impressive and disturbing, depending on what you're watching on television as well. So you got to add that in. Christina, thanks a lot for that.
Sight of Army helicopters and the sound of gunfire created a lot of concern this afternoon in one Houston neighborhood. This happened in southeast Houston around the old Carnegie Vanguard High School, where he received a ton of phone calls from worried neighbors wondering what was going on. Well, Eyewitness News reporter Jessica Willie is live to explain what it was. Jessica?
Yeah, Dave, it was frightening for sure, and to some at nearby Roberts Elementary, so unexpected that the school was locked down for a short time until everyone realized it was a drill. With military helicopters flying above her southeast Houston neighborhood, Frances Gerald didn't know what to think.
When you see this, you think the worst. Right. When you hear this, you think the worst.
And so she passed along her concern.
She told me, don't come home because it sounds like we're in a war zone. Guns shooting and helicopters flying around over the house.
The Army, along with other agencies, had taken over the old Carnegie Vanguard High School. There were armed men in fatigues, plenty of weapons, and what many thought were real live rounds.
I felt like I was in a war zone. It just was nonstop. So I was terrified.
Turns out it was a multi-agency training drill that Gerald wished would have come with warning.
They could have done a better job at notifying the neighborhood.
Others needed no explanation.
If it's to protect our kids, I'm all for it.
And an Army major who was out here wouldn't tell us exactly what kind of training they were doing. HPD was aware of what was going on, but the fire department apparently wasn't. In fact, an ambulance was even dispatched this way for a shots fired call until HPD told them it wasn't real. Reporting live tonight from Southeast Houston, Jessica Willie, 13 Eyewitness News.
One thing that I think is really interesting here, the one guy in Houston didn't really need an explanation and said, if it's for the kids, then I'm all for it. So it seems like he just automatically jumped to the conclusion, oh, they're trying to protect children. But that reminds me of the Ben Franklin quote, those who would give up essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And when I was in college, there was an active shooter drill on the campus. And they told everyone like a month in advance, and they kept reminding everyone through emails and, there will be blanks fired on, campus, and this is going to occur at this time. Like they made sure, like they didn't want the police to come, so it's totally different. Like I don't understand, why wouldn't they want to tell people this is only a drill? Why wouldn't they tell even like the ambulance and the fire department? I mean, what is the purpose behind that?
Yeah, normally when there are these simulations and drills, all agencies are notified. Mm-hmm. I worked for a hospital for several years doing security, and we would get notified whenever they were going to do one of these disaster preparedness drills, and they would actually seek volunteers from the hospital and they would notify the ambulance services, the fire departments, pretty much every agency that might wind up getting a telephone call about, hey, there's a massive wreck over here. No, that's just a drill. That way they could tell anybody calling in. But it seems now that everything is so hush-hush because, well, there's security concerns, and we don't want, somebody to take advantage of the fact that we're doing a drill and then turn it into an actual situation.
Yeah, and another thing that I really question, what are they preparing for? Why are these drills necessary? I mean, is there something that they know that they're not telling us? I mean, they're preparing, it looks like to me, to deploy military assets into urban areas. So,
yeah, it is really scary and shocking. And as we were discussing during the video, they've been doing disaster drills for years. But the military drills in populated areas, this is something that is totally new. And I think it's something to where, as you said, maybe they know something we don't, or maybe they're trying to just get people used to seeing military in the cities for when they do completely go into a police state and basically turn the U.S. into what would look like Soviet Russia.
Yeah, so just like conditioning people that this is normal, this is acceptable, But I would say, like, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between police and military now. I mean, a lot of they've gotten equipment from Homeland Security. They're getting training.
They're using some of the same devices on civilians here that were invented for warfare purposes to be used against supposed terrorists over in the Middle East. The LRAD, which is the long-range acoustical device, has been used on U.S. soil several times over the past 5 years against peaceful protesters who just happened to be protesting somewhere that either the police or the military don't want protesters. Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins has recently introduced H.R. 396 to reduce the pay of members of the House and Senate by 20%. The bill would also prohibit any salary raises unless the government has a balanced budget. Under current law, members automatically receive annual cost of living adjustments unless Congress votes not to accept it. Representative Jenkins said, members of Congress should not be rewarded for continuing to rack up red ink. When companies report a loss, they do not give their employees a raise. It should be the same for Congress.
All members of Congress receive a salary of at least $174,000, as well as other benefits such as health insurance, pensions, and up to $1.6 million for office expenses through their member representational allowance. If passed, H.R. 396 would save $19 million, and per the 27th Amendment, H.R. 396 could not take effect until January 2015.
Now, there's not a provision in this bill that actually says that it doesn't take effect until January 2015. Her bill actually says that it would take effect immediately, but the 27th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that no law varying the compensation for members of Congress shall take effect until after an election has occurred, which basically means that Congress can't decide to raise their pay to $3 million a year effective tomorrow. It has to go through at least one election. That way, there is sort of a check on Congress, even though 90% of members of Congress consistently get reelected. At least you could then vote the people out before they see the fruits of the bills that was passed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's not really an effective check. I mean, I guess it's good in theory. And you were pointing out earlier before the show that this was actually one of the first proposals, I guess.
It was one of the first 12 amendments that were proposed by the Congress. All of them passed the Congress, and 11 of the amendments were ratified. The first 10 are called the Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. What is currently the 27th Amendment was one of those 12, and there's another amendment that was proposed and could still potentially be ratified, that is the Congressional Apportionment Amendment. which would actually allow the size of Congress to increase with the population, where currently the size of Congress has been stuck at 435 members in the House since the early 1940s, I believe. So despite the fact that the population of the country has grown vastly, the size of Congress has remained the same.
That's kind of interesting. And it's also interesting that, you know, as the story pointed out, the members of Congress get a raise anyway unless they don't vote for it.
Exactly. And our final story features Alex Schaefer, an artist who in recent years has been highly critical of the corrupt banking system in our country, specifically the unholy union of banks and state. He is best known for his depiction of the high-profile bank Chase on fire. In this next video, Schaefer tries a new form of expression where he exercises his God-given right of free speech with harmless, washable chalk. As we have discussed in previous episodes, chalking is a terrific form of civil disobedience that draws attention and starts conversation. And it does it all without the use of violence. It is our responsibility to protest the wrongs in this world in any way that we can. To do otherwise is simply an invitation for those in power to continue stripping us of our rights, liberty, and prosperity.
So what are we doing today, Alex?
We're gonna go chalk. We're gonna go right on the corner of 6th and Figueroa in front of the big Chase Tower there. And we are going to engage in some passive disobedience against the state. So we got our art supplies. We got it's going to be Chase. So we have blue and white chalk, and you know, pastels. I'm not a big pastel artist really, but this is street pastels. Chalking right now is kind of a hot button issue. I mean, it's technically illegal. Of course, it's selective enforcement. I mean, the police aren't going to arrest a kid for playing hopscotch. I think that chalking is a great form of protest. I believe that Americans should be protesting right now, every day. We can't just wait for this election season to end and think the next guy is going to do anything different. And I just believe that chalking is a perfect form of civil disobedience that is nonviolent, non-destructive, and a way for people to begin to let their thoughts out so that once again we can get a nice, good, righteous wave of protest.
Do you have a permit to be
No.
out here? Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Well, I'm going to keep doing it.
Okay, well then I will call security.
Okay.
All right, but if you have a permit, that's great.
No, I don't.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Protest is the last thing that Americans have. If our leaders aren't doing anything about this crime, then we have to get out there again. I mean, I've been talking to my friends, figuring out what is going to possibly happen, weighing what I'm going to do versus what might happen, jail or a fine or a court or whatever. And to me, it's worth it. It's worth it at this point. It's symbolic. There's an importance to symbolism. I mean, the Boston Tea Party probably didn't really do that much, but it was a symbolic thing that people could rally behind, you know. And I think that people need to see someone engaging in civil disobedience. I mean, there's going to be plenty of unemployed people in the near future that are going to have time and inclination to just say, screw it, I'm doing this. Do this at the place where they're committing the crime.
Yeah, I can't believe that they arrested him, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's been arrest in New Hampshire for chalking. So.
Yeah, there was the Chalking 8 incident in Manchester a couple of years ago in which 8 people were arrested for supposedly using chalk. My understanding is that a couple of the people that were arrested actually were not using chalk. They just didn't happen to move away fast enough when other people were getting arrested. And something else that I think is really interesting, the way they make the statement, I'm going to have to ask you to do the following. It makes it sound as though they are telling you to do the following instead of actually asking you a question.
Yeah, and I remember you were talking with Garrett of Free Concord at the college, and they did something similar. I mean, they always want a permit if you're going out there. They're always going to come to check you out. But
well, and even on Chalk the Police Day, which was October 1st, when Andy Bohannon from the Parks and Recreation Department came into Central Square and basically told us, you're not allowed to do this. And he didn't say anything to the little girl that someone had given chalk to, and she's sitting there drawing on the sidewalk. He didn't say anything to her, but made sure that he said something to all of the grown people that were writing peaceful messages.
Yeah, and it's totally harmless. It's non-violent. I mean, it's not like you're out there spray painting something. I mean,
right.
I can't believe how ridiculous it is that they'd freak out about chalk and like, oh, you have to go get a permit to exercise your free speech, and you have to be in the free speech zone, and I don't know, like if you have to get a permit, to me, you don't even have the right. Would you agree with that? I mean,
right, because you only need permits to do things that are illegal, right? Such as, trying to burn things. Well, you have to have a permit to be able to burn things. Well, then I don't really have a right to set things on fire, do I?
Well, you have a right to set your own things on fire, in my opinion, but the city disagrees with that.
I agree, but I'm just saying, the fact that you need a permit, otherwise that means it's arson. By burning your own trash, you're committing arson, basically. But they just call it fire without a permit. Well, one thing that I think is interesting, in this video, they showed somebody out with the power washer spraying all of the chalk away. The first Chalk the Police incident that I'm aware of was from a couple of years ago in Richmond, where it was right after a little girl had got fined for using chalk at a public park. And a group of people went outside of the Richmond Police Department and they advertised it as Chalk the Police. They went out, they had chalk, they drew messages, and immediately after they were done, it rained, but they had somebody power wash the sidewalk anyway.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm James Cleveland.
And I'm Darryl W. Perry. May you each find happiness, peace, and prosperity.